Twilight hung over the desert like a tattered shawl, its edges frayed by wind and dust. The horizon bled into hues of copper and indigo, while the sound of coyotes carried faintly, hollow as a memory echoing through stone canyons. A man rode slow upon a dark horse, broad-shouldered, his shadow long and bent upon the land. The weight of silence rode with him, heavier than his saddle. His name was Silas Stone, though in half the towns scattered across the frontier, he was little more than a rumor, one spoken of in hushed tones, one avoided by mothers when their children asked about the scarred cowboy who never stayed long. He thought himself destined to remain a ghost upon the earth, until two small voices broke through the dusk. And their words, frail and urgent, would change everything. He felt them before he saw them, two pairs of small feet scrambling over dust, the sound of desperate breath catching. Out of the amber light appeared two girls, twins, no more than 5, their hair tangled by the desert wind. They stumbled into his shadow, clung to his boots, and one lifted her trembling face to whisper, "Our mother is hurting, help us." Her words struck sharper than any bullet. Silas sat still in the saddle, staring down with eyes dark as obsidian, trying to understand. Hurting? What curse or danger did they mean? The girls' voices quivered like strings in a storm, and in them he heard a plea too pure to be denied. Yet even as compassion stirred, doubt coiled around him like a snake. He had failed before. What if he failed again? He thought of riding on. God knows, the years had taught him to leave other people's sorrows untouched. But those eyes, their desperate innocence, made something in his chest ache, something long buried beneath guilt and dust. He swung down from the horse, boots pressing into sand, the earth steady but his spirit uneasy. He knelt to meet their gaze. One girl clutched his coat, whispering her name, Ahiv. The other, shy as moonlight, pressed closer and breathed hers, Istis. Their tiny fingers dug into his hand, pulling him toward the unknown, toward the one they called Mommy. And Silas, though every instinct told him to turn back, found himself following, each step heavy with ghosts, each breath tightening against the question clawing at him. Was he worthy of saving anyone again? They led him past the jagged ridges into a hollow where a dying fire flickered. There sat a woman, still as carved wood, her hair loose across her shoulders, her eyes the deep, watchful eyes of a hawk. She was Elsie Blackbird, widow, mother, last of her husband's line. Grief lay upon her like a second skin, yet there was dignity in the set of her jaw, in the way she held herself upright though the world pressed hard upon her. Her daughters ran into her arms, and she folded them close without surprise at Silas's presence, only a measured glance, as though she had long expected a stranger to arrive. Behind her calmness lingered whispers of judgment, whispers he felt even without hearing. Widows in the frontier were not spared the cruelty of tongues. She bore it with quiet fire, but that fire flickered low. And somewhere in the shadows of that camp, Silas sensed danger waiting, patient as a vulture. She offered him no welcome, nor rejection, only silence, as though testing what kind of man he was. Silas laid his hat aside and crouched by the fire, letting the girls chatter nervously between them. The wind pressed colder, stirring sand into their faces. Elsie's gaze remained fixed on him, measuring his worth in ways words could not. Then she spoke at last, her voice low but firm. "Jedediah Crow comes at dawn. He says this is my last night upon the land of my people. He means to make it true." The name tasted of iron, heavy with cruelty. Silas knew the kind. Land barons who carved up soil with greed, who bled families dry and cloaked it in law. He looked at her daughters clinging to her dress, then back at Elsie, and for the first time in years, he felt something like anger stir not for himself, but for another. And yet, he said nothing. Words had failed him once before. Better, he thought, to let deeds speak. That night stretched long. Silas did not promise protection, nor vow loyalty. Instead, he sat sharpening her broken knife with a stone until the edge shone again. He draped his coat across the sleeping twins, who curled together like fawns beneath its weight. He kept watch under the starlight, a silent sentinel, his back to the fire and his eyes upon the dark horizon where threat might rise. Elsie pretended to sleep, though her eyes remained half open, watching this stranger who gave without asking. Pride in her made her resist the comfort he offered. Yet in the stillness of midnight she allowed herself a fragile thought. Perhaps the world had not wholly turned against her. The question lingered, quiet but alive. Could she trust this scarred man who bore his silence like armor? By dawn, the answer pressed hard upon them. Jedediah Crow arrived with his men, their horses stirring dust, their faces cruel beneath wide hats. Crow himself was a gaunt figure, eyes sharp as hawks, lips curved with arrogance. He dismounted, boots striking the earth like a verdict. "Elsie Blackbird," he sneered, "your time is done. Widowhood suits you poorly, and your daughters deserve better than to starve on cursed land. By sundown you leave, or you are buried here." His gaze shifted to Silas, standing tall and still by the fire. A smirk cracked across Crow's face. "And what's this? A drifter, a vagabond, clinging to a widow's skirts? Fitting. Both of you are nothing." The words hung heavy, sharper than gunmetal. Shame burned in the air, but Elsie lifted her chin, though her hands trembled upon her daughters. Silas said nothing, yet his silence was a wall, a refusal to bow. Crow's smirk faltered for the briefest breath, as though sensing steel behind that stillness. Then the storm broke. One of Crow's men lunged forward, shoving past the girls. Elsie cried out, and in that instant Silas moved. His body, long trained in violence he had sworn to leave behind, surged with a restrained fury. He struck fast, not with reckless rage but with the precision of a man who knew the cost of each blow. The air filled with shouts, the crack of fists, the glint of steel. Crow drew his pistol, but before he could fire, Elsie hurled a burning branch from the fire, striking his arm and sending the gun clattering into the dust. The twins screamed, but not in despair, in awe, seeing their mother stand unbroken. Silas fought with the weight of redemption pressing each strike, not to kill needlessly but to shield those behind him. When the dust settled, Crow lay beaten, his men scattered like chaff in wind. He spat blood into the sand, glared once more at Elsie, then fled into the desert's open jaws. Silence returned, broken only by the girl's sobs of relief. After the storm, dawn broke clean and golden. Smoke curled faint from the dying fire, carrying with it the smell of charred wood and blood. Silas sank to his knees, breath ragged, his hands trembling as he reached for Elsie's arm to bind a wound she had suffered. She did not pull away. Instead, their eyes met, his, shadowed with shame and hope, hers, weary yet glowing with something gentler. Days passed, then weeks. Each evening, Silas sat by their fire, telling the girls stories of stars and rivers. Elsie listened in silence, but sometimes, when she thought he did not see, she smiled faintly. Trust, slow as desert rain, seeped into the cracks of their guarded hearts. And from trust, something rarer began to stir. Love did not arrive with declarations or stolen kisses, it bloomed quietly in gestures. The way she handed him bread, the way he brushed dust from her daughter's hair, the way silence between them grew comfortable rather than sharp. At last, the tribe gathered, old voices whispering blessings as dawn painted the sky in hues of rose. Old Man Boone, elder of the people, lifted his hands and spoke words of union. Silas stood with Elsie before the fire, the twins clinging to his legs, their laughter bright as chimes. No vows were shouted, no grand promises made. Their union was simpler, deeper, a recognition of souls who had walked through ash and come out willing to begin again. When Boone's voice fell silent, when the flames leapt high, Silas bent his head and breathed softly. "I thought my life ended long ago. But you have shown me it has only just begun." And for the first time in years, his heart felt whole. Years later, when the desert winds still told tales, I, an old soul, remembered their story. And I tell it now to you, for perhaps you too carry burdens unseen, wounds unspoken. Know this: salvation rarely comes with thunder. It comes in the quiet, in the small mercies of strangers, in a hand extended through darkness. Silas Stone found his redemption not in gunfire, but in the laughter of two children, in the steady courage of a widow, in the simple act of staying when he could have walked away. And so can we all, if we dare. Listen closely. Sometimes the desert itself seems to whisper it still. The greatest battles are not fought with guns, but with hearts that refuse to yield.